U.S. President Donald Trump has criticized Vladimir Putin, saying he was, quote, very angry that the Russian president had questioned Vladimir Zelensky's legitimacy as Ukraine's leader. The shift in tone from Trump suggests growing impatience with the Kremlin, particularly as heavy Russian attacks on Ukraine continue despite U.S.-led talks to bring the conflict to an end.
Heavy Russian drone and missile strikes continue to bring death and destruction to Ukraine's cities, despite Kremlin claims that they are avoiding civilian infrastructure. This attack on Kharkiv killed 2 and injured dozens of others, including troops recovering from war wounds at a military hospital. Apartment blocks at a shopping centre were also hit in the strike, which the Ukrainians said involved hundreds of drones. The attack comes as US President Donald Trump shows signs of losing his patience with Russian President Vladimir Putin. In a sharp change of tone towards Moscow, Trump said he was very angry after Putin suggested Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky should step down as a precondition for peace. Last week, Putin suggested the United Nations could temporarily take over the governance of Ukraine.
For what purpose? In order to bring to power a viable government that enjoys the people's trust, and then we can begin negotiations with them on a peace treaty.
Speaking with NBC's Meet the Press, President Trump said, "If Russia and I are unable to make a deal on stopping the bloodshed in Ukraine, and if I think it was Russia's fault, I'm going to put secondary tariffs on oil, on all oil coming out of Russia. The tariffs could be between 25% and 50%, he added. The warning comes as Zelensky is urging more pressure to force Russia to end its attacks and agree to a peace deal.
Our partners must understand that these Russian strikes target not only our people, but also all international efforts, diplomatic efforts aimed at ending this war."
Trump has made ending the war swiftly a key priority. After 3 years of fighting, it is becoming clearer that a tight timeline is increasingly unrealistic.
We asked our Washington correspondent, Janelle Dumoulin, if this spelled the end of the seemingly good relationship between Trump and Putin.
You know, we've seen more often than not a deep affinity coming from Trump towards Putin. He often praises Putin. He rarely criticizes him. As such, it's really hard to say whether this is a sea change in the relationship, but it is definitely a shift in tone. And although we do have to note that in that same call, Trump did say that the relationship with Putin is good and that his anger will dissipate quickly if Putin does the right thing. So what we're seeing is that Trump very much wants to be seen as someone who is in control of securing this peace process, someone who is in control of both Putin and Zelensky. So what he's doing now is he's using these warnings of frustration as a sort of negotiation tool, as a sort of stick for Putin to force his hand. Now, Trump, of course, campaigned on a speedy end to the war. Putin has sought to delay by seeking ever more concessions. And as Trump said in his remarks to Meet the Press, these statements from Putin about seeking a new leader in Ukraine, that is only something that is going to lengthen the timeline further. As such, that makes Trump seem less effective as a negotiator-in-chief, as someone who's able to bring about quick results. And you could see how that sort of knock on his image could end up being a sticking point in his relationship with Putin.
Well, Janelle, Trump didn't just say he was angry. He also made these threats of slapping Russia with secondary tariffs on all of the oil coming out of the country. Just how serious would that be, and how could that impact these ceasefire negotiations to end the conflict with Ukraine?
So because the U.S. Does not import energy from Russia, the idea of these secondary tariffs, as Trump called them, is to penalize buyers of Russian energy outside of the United States and find themselves, quote, unable to do business with the United States. That is what That is what Trump said. Now, there are no details as how this would be possibly enforced, but theoretically, this could make it very difficult for Russia to sell its oil to its biggest customers like India and China. And because we know that Russia is still very much dependent on those energy export revenues, it could be then hard for Russia to finance its war machine. So Trump is essentially saying, we will make it harder for you to wage war. And again, he is using that as another potential stick in these ceasefire negotiations. And, we know that Trump does have a habit of following through on tariff threats. Tariff policy is a policy that he enjoys enforcing. But at the moment, we are still talking on the level of threats and not on the level of policy. As such, it is difficult to say for certain how serious this could end up being for Russia.
That was Janelle Jamalon reporting for us from Washington, D.C. Janelle, many thanks.